The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
You know, this new thing we got going on here on Fantasy NBA Today really has me confused what day of the week it is. With, we got rotating show hosts, and so I've lost track of it. I think it's Wednesday night, which means this is your Thursday edition of Fantasy NBA Today. What's happening, everybody? Dan Besbris, Neil Rochlani with you from across the United States, sort of, I guess. We're like a 4-hour flight apart, right? Or one very easy Google Hangout call. Good evening, Neil, and good morning, everyone else.
Good evening, Dan. Great to be back with you.
So, the rotating cavalry here. You did a show with Adrian yesterday. You covered a Central Division team. Did you guys talk about your hometown Bulls? That was a Bulls show, wasn't it?
We did. We talked about Chicago Bulls, and it was fun to get Adrian's perspective. Some also thoughts on what's going to come up with the draft, and we'll see how it all plays out.
Yeah, you guys actually studied the draft. I've admitted many times that I don't know anything going on with it. What were the Bulls have a marginal pick in the draft, right?
Yeah, I believe they have the 7th pick, and so we're hoping to get a big man. At least I'm hoping to get a big man. Adrian's hoping to get a big man, so we'll see how they go. There has been talk, about Khris Dunn not having a great offseason, so, and as you know, he didn't have a great career in Minnesota, so maybe they're not going to stay with him for the future. We'll see. And there's a couple good point guards out there. So,
well, I know nothing about any of them, and so I can add nothing to this conversation. This is a Hoop Ball presentation at Dan Besbris at Ball with Neil. If you want to give us a follow on Twitter, of course, for those who happen to be listening today for the first time, which I realize is a select few of you, but welcome. We are currently on team number 24 of our, which I guess you can kind of call end of season breakdown, in that we're not talking about anything that's happened on purpose in the off season so far. That is to say, if there's been a coaching fire or something like that, we can talk about it a little bit. But we will also reassess these teams after free agency. We can knock them out either one by one, or we can do them in small chunks. The point of all of this is really to take a look at what happened for a particular team during this most recently completed season, and then kind of what we're looking for. I always find that to be a useful tool, and I do it a lot on this podcast, and so hopefully people have either come to appreciate it or they've come to tune it out whenever I get to that point. But when we were, Neil, when I would talk during the regular season about kind of what was happening on any given night. Okay, here are the 7 games on the slate for this evening. I would often on the podcast say, okay, here's what I'm looking for tonight. Here are the guys that I'm really watching closely. Here are the guys I might make moves on by halftime if they're playing well enough. And I think that's a little bit longer term here now, what we're doing in the offseason, right? Where, Neil, you and I are going to talk about the Milwaukee Bucks on today's show shortly, but you and Adrian talked about the Bulls. Adrian and we talked about the Cavs and sort of what we can be looking for. Obviously, LeBron is the big part of that one. I talked about the Pacers on Monday's show. Okay, here's what I'm looking for. Do I think Thad Young is still going to be undervalued? Darren Collison undervalued? Oladipo over? All those little things that as we get into fantasy draft season, we've already sort of got the names on a paper and we're looking to see if things fall in the direction that we were expecting. I hope I've done an okay job of summarizing what we're working on here, but you'll probably get an idea as we move forward, and many of you have listened to this stuff before, so you already know what we're talking about. Neil, we got the Bucks today, and you picked them from the 2 remaining teams, the other one being, of course, the Detroit Pistons. I would ask you why you picked the Bucks over the Pistons, but I'm pretty sure I know the answer to that question. The hiring of Dwayne Casey, that didn't sway you back Detroit's way?
I like predictability. Bucks are a lot easier to go through than the Pistons right now. So, yes. That is, I think, a pretty good hire, though. And so, same with Milwaukee with Budenholzer. So, we'll see how that fares out.
Milwaukee, by the way, I'll give us the quick rundown here, and then, Neil, I want you to take us into the fantasy landscape. From the sports betting side, the Bucks over-under for this season win total was set at 47.5. I gave out the under on that in my beginning of the season write-up. And let's see, what did I this is kind of fun for me to go back and read what I wrote to see if I got it right for the right reasons. And obviously I got this one right. What I wrote, and by the way, this is a quote, "I can't solve this puzzle. This number looks wacky high. Am I missing something? Giannis Antetokounmpo," I spelled his name incorrectly on purpose just to make a joke, "is awesome and transcendent, but one player generally doesn't win 48 games unless his name sounds a bit more French." That, of course, a reference to LeBron. And yes, by the way, LeBron basically won 50 games by himself this year. Khris Middleton is solid, but Jabari Parker's still out. Malcolm Brogdon is fine. Of course, he ended up getting hurt. But sheesh, 48 games to get there. Maybe they'll surprise me. I'd probably leave this one alone, but I ended up giving the under, and it hit by a decent amount. And, that's just a lot of that was comparative analysis. You look at what a team did the previous season, what would have to change for them to move in a particular direction. And for me, looking at the Bucks, it was, look, they're still not at full strength. They still don't play any defense, and it bore itself out. Even in kind of this clunker of an Eastern Conference, they were, by all accounts, from a win-loss perspective, Neil, wouldn't you agree that the Bucks were kind of a disappointment this year at just 6 games over 500 when you've got that much raw talent? And, by the way, they traded for Eric Bledsoe. So, we hit that under despite all of that. I mean, that they really should have been better.
Yes, they should have been better. I would have probably gone with the over, looking back at that number. Jason Kidd doesn't get much respect as a basketball coach, which may be the reason why he's no longer there. And so maybe that was part of it. But yeah, the talent seems to be good enough. And the fantasy value is very good on this team. So as a numbers guy, I think more wins would equate to all these levels of ability, but it didn't happen. I'm very proud of you for being able to predict that.
Yeah, the thing is, 50 wins is still a lot of wins, and I don't know if I think we get caught up thinking about how these good teams can just pile up victories, how easy it always seems to be for teams like the Spurs to just walk to 50 wins. And even this year, San Antonio got 47 wins, and they played the whole year without Kawhi Leonard. 50 wins is hard. 50 wins is tough, man. There were only 6 teams in the NBA that hit that mark this year. The Cavs, 50 on the nose. The Sixers, 52. And then, of course, the Rockets, the Warriors in the Western Conference, and the Raptors and Celtics were sort of the teams that were safely above that mark. But 50's tough. Trailblazers, 3rd seed in the West at 49 wins. I think the reason to expect maybe the Bucks could have gotten to 48 or 49 is that they do play a lot of crummy competition out east. So they should have been better. They were a losing team on the road at just 19-22, 25-16 at home, which is fine, but just, not good enough. 6-10 in their division, only 2 games over 500 in their conference. They were actually better against the Western Conference. They were 17-13, I think, against the West, if I'm not mistaken. So, things, hopefully they can improve. It comes down to, and I heard this term used by some of the Bucks blog staff, they called it hair on fire defense, and I've dropped that on the podcast a few times because they're just so unprincipled on that side of the ball. Everybody's just chasing the basketball all the time, and most decent NBA teams can pass well enough to beat that kind of wacky defense, and sure enough, that's what you saw. They got beat by, let's be honest here. Yes, Boston put together a hell of a playoff run, but from a pure talent perspective, Boston without Kyrie and without Gordon Hayward, Bucks should have beat them. I mean, Giannis Antetokounmpo, clearly the best player on the court, and you could probably argue Khris Middleton, a wash with Al Horford. That's pretty close. They need to learn how to defend an entire NBA team, and I don't know that an offseason is going to teach that. Giannis could get better. Middleton could get better. I don't know that I see these problems fixing themselves unless these guys can sort of fully buy into different ideas on that side of the basketball. I don't know. Are you more optimistic than I am on them learning how to play defense?
They'd have to switch their defense. I mean, they had the athletes, I guess, maybe to do that the crazy scheme that Jason Kidd had them doing and thinking that it could work, which obviously it didn't. I think the big disappointment was, or at least a disappointment, was Brogdon getting hurt. I mean, Rookie of the year before, obviously he wasn't going to be a superstar, but I think he might have played a small impact in being injured and helping that team achieve some wins. And then Parker, when he came back, was never really what I think I expected from a fantasy perspective or from a real basketball perspective. So he was a disappointment in that way too. And then McCurr, if I'm pronouncing his last name right, Thon McCurr, he was sort of buzzy, like maybe he'll jump out, last year and play like 20 some minutes and get a lot of blocks. And he never really developed into what at least I thought he might be in his second season. So maybe third season.
Yeah,
so we'll
see. I
don't have. I mean, Budenholzer is obviously a very good coach. So maybe they will get more wins next year, but I'd have to wait and see before I predict it.
Yeah, with the old Coach Bud out there, I mean, my initial hope would be that sort of team passing improves, but they were okay in that respect anyway. I don't know. I mean, they should be better than a 7 seed. That's sort of what it all comes down to for me. In either conference, frankly, with a play as good as Giannis Antetokounmpo and a player as good as Khris Middleton, they should be finding a way to do more. We'll see. In terms of team win totals, obviously we'll keep an eye on that moving forward. From a salary perspective, just quickly here, we'll blast through a few numbers before we turn our attention to the fantasy side. Giannis signed through 2021. He is set to make $24 million this coming season, a very reasonable price for someone of his ability. Eric Bledsoe, one more year on his deal. He is on a $15 million contract. Khris Middleton, by all accounts, a wildly affordable year coming up at just $13 million. The following season, by the way, for Middleton is a player option. My guess is he'll opt out. He should make more money than that. John Henson's making about $10 million this coming year. Mirza Teletovic, who, by the way, not dead, making $10.5 million next year. Tony Snell, $10 million. Matthew Dellavedova, $9.5 million. Jabari Parker, a restricted free agent. They might just let him go. And then Larry Sanders, by the way, his contract finally officially coming off the books, as is Jason Terry. Only about $10 million coming off the books, 15, I guess, somewhere in that neck of the woods if you roll Jabari Parker in there. So it doesn't free up a whole lot of space for Milwaukee, but, darned if it doesn't look like they could use some sort of solution at the center spot, because John Henson has been my shot-blocking man crush for many years, and then finally he got an opportunity this season, and it looked like he played like he wanted to stay out of foul trouble. And then Thon McCare or Maker, however he wants it pronounced, I'm actually not 100% certain on that. He was a guy to me that got overhyped by other fantasy sites, and that's what I'm blaming that on. He can shoot the 3 ball. He's just not that quick. He sort of moves in that sluggish Roy Hibbert-esque fashion. Obviously, he's more athletic than Hibbert is, but I don't think he's ever going to be a difference-making center in the NBA either. They need somebody that can actually do some stuff from a big man spot, or just kind of rebuild their team a little bit and play a stretch 4 at that center spot. We've seen them actually play Giannis a little bit there, but if it's not him, they don't really have any other options in that mold that can take that spot on the floor. So I don't know how they do it, but they've got to swing something. What do you think they can do from a personnel standpoint, Neil, to address concerns? For me, it's the center spot.
Yeah, so that means you're not big on Marshall Plumlee.
I do love Plumlees. I just don't know that I love them as NBA players.
Yeah, well, that is their one glaring weakness in their rotation. So we'll see where they go. Every other position seems pretty strong, but Jabari Parker, like you said, probably won't be around. I don't think he's gonna demand a salary they can't afford, and then or probably do not want to pay, so they'll let him walk. And then I don't know what they're going to do with the center position. I'm also really interested to see if Tony Snell ever develops. It looks like he's not going to be a solid role player. He started a lot for them this year and doesn't really do much fantasy value, or I'm not sure about real life value, but I didn't see a lot of great plays through him or him really adding a lot of value as like a glue guy or something. So I think that position and then the center, like you said, are the biggest glaring weaknesses.
All right, what do you see from the fantasy side of things? Where do you want to start there?
Well, let's talk with Giannis since he's like, the main guy on their team. and I'm looking at
how I've been accused of hating Giannis this year.
What's that?
You saw that, right? The world thinks that I hate Giannis.
Yeah, I know. Unless you think he's the best player on the planet, you must hate him. I don't understand why value is so hard to learn. Anyway, so I'm looking at 8 category averages. So that's my reference point. And so he finished 8th, which certainly not as high as he was projected to go in most drafts. In the draft that I'm most familiar with, he went first, and I don't think it was too bad to take him high because he does a lot of great things. And I like guys who are pretty safe, and so he's very safe there. Obviously, though, it was overvalued to go in the top 2 or 3. You had him. Did you have him like 5th overall? I forget where you.
Yeah,
had him.
I had him. I thought he would be. I actually thought he would be. I thought 3rd was where he could max out, which I think was how I phrased it last year. I don't remember exactly where I said. I think I said, look, if you take him at 3, I'm not going to argue with you. But I had him in that next group behind. I thought Kevin Durant actually was going to run away with it, and of course he ended up missing a handful of games. But I don't feel like I was all that far off. Very few people thought that Anthony Davis was going to be so far out in front of everybody this year, so I don't feel bad about that one. But yeah, less than where exactly I had Giannis, because him finishing at he was number 7, by the way, in 9 cat, so 9 and 8, almost an exact match. I mean, you probably heard these shows where I was kind of ranting and raving about Giannis. I just didn't see him making that next leap. It's hard to go from being, a top 7-ish, that 5 to 7 range to top 2 or 3. You either need to play all 82 games every year, or you need to have statistical categories where you are so good that you can basically win it on your own, or you go kind of the Kawhi Leonard method where you literally don't have any category where you aren't helping your team. And for Giannis, he's a bad foul shooter. Not bad, like, punt bad, but not good. A guy that gets to the line 8 times a game, he should be helping you. He's not a three-point shooter. And last year, not this most recent season, the previous year, I felt like he was so far over his head on the defensive side of things that, my guess was, look, I don't think he can replicate that. His scoring went up this year by 4 points per game, which I think was more than I expected. He took a lot of shots this season, considering how many guys he had around him. But the other stuff didn't really improve. In fact, his assists went down, his steals went down, his blocks went down, his free throw number went up, and percentage went down. Field goal percent is always pretty good for him, and he still only made 0.6 3-pointers per game. The key with Giannis that I need to stress again, well, first, that I don't hate him. I think he's pretty awesome, and I'd pay to go watch him play, is that unless he can fix either the 3-pointers or the free throw percent, it doesn't have to be both. It's got to be one or the other. He's not going to jump over those 3 or 4 guys in front of him. They're just too reliable, too good, and without holes in their game. You can't leapfrog those guys with 2 categories where you're not contributing. That's the modern NBA. These top 5 guys are so crazy good. It's insane.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I will say, though, that we have seen some guys develop 3-point shooting pretty quickly in the last few years, some big men. So maybe he does take a leap forward in that. I mean, that you'd have to hope. But at 0.6, he's going to be nowhere near the number 1 spot. And then, like you said, his defensive stats are going down in steals and blocks, which I would expect to hold going next year. 1.5 is what I'm seeing, and 1.4 respectively.
Yeah.
The points at 27, the rebounds at 10. We'll see what they do with the big man. Maybe that comes down a little bit. And then the assists of 4.8 seem, given his role as facilitator, seems pretty steady.
Yeah, pretty repeatable, I would think.
Yeah.
So again, it's not like there's a massive issue. It's just that this guy doesn't possess the fantasy tools yet to jump over the Hardens, the Durants, the Currys, the ADs, as long as they're playing like this. And I know what people are saying, well, Steph Curry, he's got a category where he doesn't do anything at all, and that's blocks. Yes, that's true, but he's also so very good in basically everything else that he can have that one category where he's awful, right? That's the difference. Giannis Antetokounmpo has 2 categories where he's hurting you, and Steph only has 1. You have to get down to 1, or you can just be Kevin Durant or Anthony Davis, and you can basically be good at everything. That's the other option, I suppose. So for me, and of course, feel free, Neil, to disagree. This is not me saying this is our position and this is where we stand. I mean, it sounds like you think the chance of him developing a three-point shot is higher than the chance of him boosting his free throw number to 80%. I honestly don't know, but that does make sense. My question for you is this: does that impact his field goal percent? If he starts taking and making more threes, does that 53% field goal number come back down to a spot where maybe that's less helpful? I don't know. What's the trade-off there?
Yeah, that would have to be the trade-off if he's taking more threes. And I'm not saying he will. I'm just saying the way the game's going and the way we've seen big men develop outside shooting, it could go that way. It's within the realm of possibility. If I would have had to guess, I would say he'd be around 1 maybe next year, not significantly higher, but higher. Still, we'll see how it plays out. The reason I don't mind someone drafting him first, second, or third is this past season is because you knew he was going to have great statistical measurements in almost every category. And I understand, Anthony Davis is a risk. Steph Curry, you can talk about maybe ankle, injury risk or just resting. Same with Durant. That team we thought would win more games. Maybe they wouldn't play as many minutes, in the fourth quarter and so forth. So maybe the Milwaukee would have to rely on him more and he would put up higher usage than those guys. So I didn't think it was a bad choice to take him early. I just didn't think he would live up to it like you predicted.
So, yeah, I can get with you on that. Like, if you take him third, you're basically saying, this is a guy I expect will play 75 to 80 games this year, and he'll give me solid numbers. So you're not going to get killed on that pick. And it's also probably worth noting that one very large thing working in Giannis's favor is that, and this is looking at 9Cat here for a moment, there really isn't anybody that can pass him. Not close, really. He's kind of the tail end of the top chunk in 9-category format, if that makes sense, where the guys in front of him this year, Anthony Davis, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, James Harden, Karl Anthony Towns, and LeBron James, the guy behind him is Damian Lillard, who, had a fantastic season, but I think we can all agree you'd rather have Giannis on your team than Dame going forward. Just, they scored the same number of points. Dame obviously better at the foul line and three-pointers. Giannis basically better at everything else. Like, they're pretty close in assists, and then you give Giannis the nod in almost every other category. There's a little bit of a drop-off there. So this is almost like the floor for Giannis is top 7. I don't see any of these guys, maybe Kawhi, if he comes back healthy, since he wasn't in the mix this year, but I don't know that he could finish worse than top 8 on a season, just because I don't see other guys out there that can get in front of him, and that makes him a relatively safe pick.
Yeah, and with last year, too, going into the league, looking at the players that were above him last season, Harden, you had Chris Paul coming in. DeMarcus Cousins actually in averages outperformed him, but he was, paired up with Anthony Davis. And then you had LeBron having a much better year than expected. So those guys were less predictable. And so as someone who's kind of scared of risk, I go with the guys that are more safe. So I can see why someone would want to take him, top 2, top 3, something like that.
All right, what do you think about Khris Middleton? He's a relatively safe guy, and he had a fantastic year.
Yeah, so I wanted to go the next 2 guys, at least from the A category perspective, that had sensational years were Bledsoe and Middleton. Bledsoe finished at 24th and Middleton at 26th, both outperforming what I thought they would be at, and probably, I think, outperforming their draft position, although I don't have that in front of me. Middleton, I don't think there's anywhere to go up, unfortunately. And so I think this is probably his ceiling. His field goal percentage was 46%, and he shoots lights out from 3. So I don't know how that gets better. And at 20 points a game, and other guys that can score around him, I don't know how that goes up either. The steals are at 1.5. That seems like a pretty high number. Rebounds at 5.2 and three-pointers at 1.8. I don't see any room for really growth there. So I probably won't take him this year because I think he might get overvalued, but he put up a phenomenal year, like you said, last year, and he looks like he belongs, if not at all-star level, very close to it.
Yeah, one thing that my big wonder with Middleton, and by the way, I do agree with you on that one. I have no bones to pick with your analysis on Khris. 20 points, almost 2 3-pointers, 5 boards, 4 assists, 1.5 steals per game. this is a guy who, career high in scoring. The steals were basically right on his career mark. Assists were above his career mark. Rebounds above his career mark. He's an 88% foul shooter, and I mean, that's like, if you want the most consistent free throw shooter in the NBA, it might be Khris Middleton. He was, over the last 3 seasons, 88.8, 88, and 88.4. He's also been at 1.8 or 1.6 3-pointers each of the last 3 years. I mean, you basically know what you're getting out of this dude. And outside of the cataclysmic injury of last season, he's also quite durable. In fact, 82, 79, 79, and 82, 4 of his last 5 seasons. And of course, he had that 29-game effort when he went through a serious injury last year. So my question with a guy like Middleton is, how high does he actually go? He was in 9-cat, he was number 26. Is he going to get drafted at the end of the second round, beginning of the third round? Is he actually going to get picked right at that number? Because if so, I do agree with you. I don't know that, because there isn't really room for him to get into the top 20 unless, looking at his numbers here, I think the only way he could move up one more half round would be probably to get his field goal percentage up to like 48, but 46.6 was basically as high as he's ever been. So I don't know that, and again, I think that puts me in the same boat with you, in that where is the upside here? The upside is he plays all 82 games and you get awesome durability out of a top 30 guy. And that's why, by the way, in total value this season, he was ranked number 12. Play all 82 games and you're that good. That's a big deal. But yeah, I'd rather he fall to, I don't know, 30 to 35 range. Then I'd scoop him up in a heartbeat. I just don't know that he's going to fall that far. In fact, it sort of doesn't seem like he will. What about Eric Bledsoe, though? I feel like he had a weird season where, the numbers are all pretty solid, but I don't know that anybody was really paying attention to him this year. Didn't it seem like he sort of dropped off the face of the earth when he went to Milwaukee, and just that if you had Bledsoe, you were probably paying attention to his numbers, and if you didn't, you were probably like, whatever, he's out in Milwaukee now.
He didn't seem like he was leading the team at all, like he did in Phoenix. So he was kind of an afterthought behind Giannis and Jason Kidd, maybe. I don't know.
But he played well, though, right? Like you made the point. He had a good fantasy season. I just can't figure out why nobody.
Good fantasy season. It was one of those seasons that was not memorable, but the numbers were great.
Yeah.
And so I don't know where to rank him next year either. I would think Middleton and Bledsoe. I would both put them as third rounders. So that's where I would look at them in 12-team leagues. Like if they're both there in the third round, I'll take them. But I don't think I can take either one in the second round.
Why do you think nobody saw how well Eric Bledsoe was playing? Was it because, like you said, he didn't really take a leadership role? Like why did nobody realize he ended up with 2 steals a game this year? That's a solid number in an important category. I mean, he was a difference maker in a defensive statistical category. That's one of the ones that we here at Hoop Ball, we value above all else in general. I mean, and 47% from the field, that's a solid number there too. Why didn't anybody notice him?
I'm looking at him now and noticing him. But also the 0.6 blocks. I don't know if you mentioned that.
I didn't.
That was pretty impressive. And that is up there with like John Wall. So he does a lot of great things. He's always been a shot blocker as well. The 47%, I don't know if that's sustainable given his history. I have to go back and look at his numbers. But
yeah, mostly 44-ish%. Although he did have 1 year in Phoenix. Of course, it was an injury-plagued year. That's been a thing for him at times. He shot 47.5% back in 2013, so it's been a bit. Generally, he's been around the 44, 45 range. So yeah, 47.5. I mean, maybe that's just a byproduct now of finally playing with someone else that's good.
Perhaps. And his sister at 5 makes sense given he's playing with Giannis. When he's been healthy, he's always been a very great contributor in fantasies for fantasy value. So I'm not sure why he wasn't noticed. I don't have any good reason except that he does put up great numbers. I just think second round value just seems too high for him next year. We'll have to see where he gets ranked.
Yeah, 9-cat, by the way, he was number 33 because of the 2.9 turnover, so that did put a little ding on him. I mean, he's been a guy that's been drafted in the mid to late 30s for a few years in a row, and he's been generally a disappointment because of the injury stuff. He played 74 games this year, despite that whole weird, sitting in the hair salon thing early in the season. He was basically healthy once he got to Milwaukee. So I don't know. I mean, it makes you think that there were some healthy DNPs in Phoenix, and obviously, last year, Phoenix just sat him the whole post-All-Star break stretch without an injury. So, that's one check mark, I think, on the positive side for Bledsoe, in that at least if he's, assuming Milwaukee doesn't move him, and that's how we're doing this season in review part, he's going to be on a team that's fighting for playoff spots, so at least he'll play until the end of the year, barring an actual injury. So if he misses time, it would be because he's actually hurt. And that's better than the alternative, right?
Yeah, he's not going to miss time because they're tanking. So that's a good thing.
Hooray.
Or that he's unhappy with management. But yeah, so both these guys, Bledsoe and Middleton, I think are third rounders for me. And I don't know if they'll get back there. We'll see where they get ranked.
I think I'd take Middleton if he falls past 30. I think I'd take Bledsoe if he falls past like about 36. So basically fourth round. I don't think I'd do him in the third. I think I'd go fourth. And that's 9-cat. By the way, I talk 9-cat. Neil talks 8-cats. You're getting both flavors on this podcast, and I love it. Okay, what about some of the lesser-known Bucks? I want to steer us in that direction since these are the big names, and the big names draw the attention. But Malcolm Brogdon was sort of on his way to an okay season. Eric Bledsoe trade happened. He went through a pretty pronounced slump, and then it actually seemed like he was starting to figure things out, and then he got hurt, and badly hurt. Still managed to finish the season inside the top 90 on a per-game basis, but also we didn't have a massive sample size playing alongside Eric Bledsoe. If they let Jabari Parker walk, that certainly frees up more shots and attempts. I actually kind of like Malcolm Brogdon as a late draft grab, mostly because I feel like a lot of people, a lot of fantasy players are going to assume he just won't be a factor because of Eric Bledsoe, but the reason he wasn't a factor was mostly because he got hurt. He was starting to play better again.
He was, but he did lose his starting spot. And I don't know if that's kind of the perception of maybe he's not going to be a factor. And then he did end up being the closeout guy. So he got close to his minutes, that were sort of projected at the beginning of the year when he was a starter. And I liked him going into last season. And so unfortunately he got hurt. And then he didn't really get the, I don't know if it's level of comfort with the team when he came back or he wasn't fully healthy or something. He just didn't seem the same player he was the year before. So assuming all is okay with him, I think it'll be a much better year for him. And I think he could be good. So an 8-cat, he ended up 99th in averages. And I think he could exceed that this year, assuming he's healthy.
Yeah, I think that a lot of factors kind of work in his favor. The injury made people forget about him. The Bledsoe trade put people sort of down on him. Coming back late in the year and not doing anything. He only played, by the way, the final 2 games of the regular season after getting hurt on February 1st. So he missed about 10 weeks of basketball at that point. 9.5, something like that. He was okay, actually, in their 7-game playoff series with the Boston Celtics. But the numbers that I wanted to point out with Brogdon is that prior to his injury, he was on a fairly torrid stretch. And this is after Eric Bledsoe was acquired. So it wasn't all the Bledsoe stuff. And yes, that did kind of put a damper on things for a little bit. But the game before he got hurt, he had a 32-point performance in that game. 32, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 3 steals, a block, and 3 3-pointers on 11 out of 14 shooting. So he was still playing. He was still seeing significant opportunity. And I don't know that people are going to remember that was the case when draft time comes around. So I have a feeling, this is a guy that can pretty easily glide into top 100 value. He's a guy that's probably going to get drafted extremely late. I think you can probably get him after that number. And then, of course, you just hope that the offseason allows the new coach to work him in. Bud likes guys that can shoot, likes guys that can pass and penetrate, and he can do all those things. So I like Brogdon. I think he could be an interesting value this coming year. And then I've got to say my sad piece here. What happened to you, John Henson? You were once so proud, so young, so virile, and now you just stand out there and you do nothing. And I don't understand it. I don't know if you're feeling blue, but I certainly am. And this is a guy who was blocking 2 shots a game in 18 minutes a couple years ago. This year he finally gets a chance to play big minutes, and he averages 1.4 blocks on a dismal 57% free throw shooting. It was all bad. He had this chance to go 2 to 2.5 blocks per game and make me such a proud man, such a proud fake dad of John Henson. And I've lost my love. He's done. I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was because he wanted to play better position defense. I don't have his personal foul count in front of me if that's what we're looking at here, but far and away the most minutes he's played in a season since way back in 2013, and he didn't do it in the categories that I was hoping for. So that he's one of my massive disappointments. And I'm not interested in him at all going forward. I think he might lose his job by the beginning of next year.
Well, that illustrates the dangers of trying to extrapolate guys with low minutes and good stats. And
good point.
To say, oh, okay, now they're going to play 30 minutes, so everything will just ramp up that linearly, I guess. Which, of course, didn't happen for him. Father's Day is coming up. If you want to send him a card, though.
I might, yeah. Or he should send me one.
Oh, that's right.
I don't know, man.
I thought, and I remember you talking about him a lot last year on the show. And when you have a guy that is a specialist, like in blocks, and can get 2+ a game, he's worth the other detriments, like maybe the free throw percentage and the other things that he doesn't really provide. If you just need that one category, and unfortunately, he didn't live up to that billing. You've got to really just be exceptional in that. And I didn't see him play a lot, so I'm not sure why he didn't get the blocks. I don't know if it was the like you said, the positional defense or something else that came into play. Maybe the energy he can't sustain it for that long a time. I don't really know, but clearly it just speaks to the lesson of just because a guy gets minutes now, he's going to obviously not necessarily go up as much in every stat category.
Yeah, per 36s are hot garbage. Unless you're playing like 32 minutes and you're extrapolating to 36, it's a wildly inflated stat. Would you take a chance on Jabari Parker next year, regardless of where he ends up? Like, is there a universe where you could see yourself drafting him?
That's an interesting question, because I thought he might have a really good season once he got back, because he did have a great fantasy season the prior year, and once he sort of got in the rhythm, and it looked like he was going to be like drafted appropriately, maybe a future all-star and all these great things he was doing both on the offensive end and on the defensive end. So I'm not sure what happened last year. I would definitely take him if he's lingering there late. His name and his talent might be too big to get past the middle rounds. I'm curious to see where he gets ranked.
Yeah,
I know that last year he was abysmal. I mean, he finished 148, basically not even worthy in 10-team leagues and barely worthy in 12-team leagues. So,
yeah, it's tough to come back from one, let alone two of those massive injuries, ACL tears and so forth. I don't know. I don't think I end up with Jabari Parker. He's a very points-centric guy, and you guys know how I feel about points. I don't know. Maybe there's a world. Maybe he ends up on a team where he's going to be the focal point, and then I sort of rethink it. But like if he ends up back in Milwaukee, there's sort of too many horses there, and I can't imagine somebody that's just starting a rebuild is going to go out and spend a ton of money on Jabari Parker. So I don't know what his fortunes look like for this coming year. It's a big question mark. And then the rest of these guys are sort of clunkers. Maybe Tony Snell. Like, I don't think I'm drafting him, but there might be a week or two that he ends up on my fantasy team if I need a quick burst of 3-pointers, right? Like if Jabari Parker doesn't come back, maybe you see Tony Snell playing some minutes, but I don't know. I mean, at this point, we're talking about 5th options and later on this team. There aren't too many teams that have 5 guys worth having on your fantasy team. That's asking an awful lot. I think I'm done after the top 4 with this club.
Yeah, I would have to have 2 starters injured before I look at Snell. I don't think he's relevant otherwise.
Yeah, or 2 starters and a reserve.
Vedova. I mean, at one point he would look like he might be fantasy relevant, and he's no longer there thanks to Bledsoe and Brogdon. So I don't see anyone else on this team that is worthy in 12-team leagues.
I'm interested to see what I'm still hung up on the season win total thing for for next year. I just like, do they move it back up again for next year? Do they leave it at, because they were under by 3.5? Do they leave it at 47.5 and assume that next year maybe they turn a corner? That's a bigger question mark for me. I do think that, like, what if LeBron goes west? That's probably a couple losses that turn into wins. What these little factors when a team is really close to a number, you have to go into. I'm very much looking forward to doing my 30-team write-up on that front. But here's my quick recap on this Milwaukee team. And Neil, I'd like to get yours right afterwards. Giannis, very safe, top 5 to top 7 pick. Probably won't be a top 2 guy. Middleton, for me, 9 category. If he makes it into the 30s, I'm drafting him. Eric Bledsoe, if he makes it into the 4th round, so 37 or later, I would look at him as well. Malcolm Brogdon's a guy I'm looking at, 10th, 11th, 12th round kind of thing. That 115 to 150 range of a draft, because I think he could go probably 2 rounds higher than that in overall value. That's where I sit with this thing. What's your 8 category recap?
Yeah, so it's pretty much the same. But Giannis is a top 5 safe pick, I think. Bledsoe and Middleton both, I think, around 30 to 35, mid-3rd round for me. Brogdon, and also I'll throw in Parker as late-round picks if they're still there. I mean, once I get to the 10th round or later, I'm really just kind of hoping for flyers, and Parker could do it. So I'm willing to take him late.
All right. That's all I got in the Bucks. You got anything else up your sleeve?
That's all I got. Thank you.
Yep. All right. Fair enough. I will do the heavy lifting tomorrow. The Friday show, you will have me solo talking about the Detroit Pistons. And yes, you can hear it in my voice. I will have that level of enthusiasm for the entire podcast tomorrow. The Pistons, where fantasy value goes to crap itself. But there are, Andre Drummond had a big year. So I'll try to spend half the podcast talking about Andre Drummond and his freak jump in free throw percentage. That didn't make it all the way to 70. You know who you are on Twitter. My buddies on Twitter that harass me anytime Andre Drummond has a 5-for-5 free throw shooting night. He is Neil Rochlani. I am Dan Besbris. You can follow us on Twitter at Dan Besbris, at Ball with Neil. This was Fantasy NBA Today, a hoop ball presentation. The Milwaukee Bucks, your Thursday club. Man, I miss basketball. I want to see a game, and it's not going to happen for a while. Although we did just learn, by the way, Neil, before I wrap this thing up, we learned that every single Summer League game is going to be televised this year. Can you believe that?
Oh, that's fantastic. I had no idea.
I'm going to try to figure, I probably can't get back out there this season. But next year, maybe next summer 2019, I think we all got to go to NBA Summer League and have a wingding. And by wingding, because we're all old people, I mean like sit in a sports book and have a stogie and a cocktail. That's a wingding, right? Am I getting there?
I have no idea what a wingding is. So yeah. I'm glad you defined it.
Yeah, we're old people. Okay, now I'm officially wrapping it up. We can talk more about Summer League as it approaches. Okay, well, I guess that's about all we got. Yeah, that's the end of the line. Those are the Milwaukee Bucks. A lot of good fantasy players on that team that didn't translate to 50 wins, but maybe they'll get there next year. For Neil, I am Dan. Once again, have a wonderful Thursday. Talk to you Friday morning. Get the week wrapped up. You made it. We made it. Almost. So long, everybody.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.